You're so stupid. Hello, welcome to Spotlight TV, a deep dive of your favorite television shows brought to you by sometimes the dumbest people you know. The past couple weeks, we've been on a kick, though. I am your host body, your patient zero, your host with the most cordyceps up his nose. I spent a semester at University of Colorado, but the monkeys had a better GPA than me. Your host who's better as a guest, Jeremiah Parker Hobbs. And joining me as he will for the entirety of The Last of Us, Maria wants to cut his hair, just the trim, but it's not the hair you think. Your favorite dumpster boy, Kamen Daugherty. What's up, man?
Yeah, I need a haircut both up top and down low. So
That's right.
I am ready and willing, Maria.
Thank you, Maria. And joining us today, a special guest. She was going to trade for the eggplant colored jacket, but it reminded her too much of her DMs. She's got notes on selection for Town Movie Night from the reality podcast Who the Fuck Knows with Emily Rose. Emily, this is a family podcast. What are we doing here? It's Emily Rose. Hi. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. I have to call back really quick. What you just said to Cayman, that was a Madison reference, was it not, from She-Hulk?
It was a little She-Hulk reference. I did throw that in there. I appreciate that.
We're starting off to a great start, and thank you for having me.
I see in the chat Patrick asking Cayman to prove that you need a downstairs haircut. We'll do that at the end of the episode. Thank you guys for joining me. Patrick, he wasn't feeling well, so he felt a little fluish, so we shot him in the face and buried him in Kansas City. And we are on our way to Wyoming for episode 6, deep dive of The Last of Us. Before we do, though, please like, follow, and subscribe to Spotlight TV Pod on Instagram and Twitter. If you are listening and you have the space, we love to see the downloads. We love to see how many of you are listening. We are up on Spotify, Apple Music, and Audible. Also, we have an email address. You are always welcome to email us at spotlighttvpod@gmail.com. Let us know some of the theories that you are working with for The Last of Us. Let us know some of the TV shows that you are watching. Cayman, I haven't even told you this, but we are opening the show with a little announcement here. The next 2 TV shows coming to Spotlight TV. We are going to do, in the month of March, 4 episodes. We are going to do 3 episodes at a time of the Amazon Prime original Daisy Jones and the Six, a 70s set Fleetwood Mac type band coming up and rising and falling. We are going to do 4 episodes on that as we transition ourselves into the brand new season of Succession.
God, fuck that shit.
We're going to stay on HBO. Did you say fuck that show?
Hate Succession, man. It makes me feel bad inside, and not in a good way like The Last of Us makes me feel bad inside. It just makes me really angry that rich people exist. So shout out to all of you rich people. I will eat you one day.
Great. And that sounds like it's an hour that I don't have to spend with you. So, so come on back for those 2. We are going to be doing some retrospectives of some TV shows that are on right now. We're going to try and do a mid-season check-in on Abbott Elementary coming up soon as well. So please keep an eye out for all of those things coming down the pike. Emily, it's your first week with us. I'd love to hear some initial thoughts before we jump into this deep dive.
Oh man, I mean, I was hesitant. Okay, I need to just get this out here now so that we can just move on.
Tell me.
I just started playing the game a couple of weeks ago, right? Haven't gotten very far. It's certainly not caught up, but this is my issue. I get a little too like, I can't take the suspense. So what I did was I watched several let's plays of the game.
Okay.
Instead of just playing the game and watch let's play. So I kind of spoiled it for myself, but I also didn't really retain it. So there's like things that I think I know are straying from the show and things that I recognize, but other things that I'm learning and enjoying. I don't know why I went on that tangent, but just so you know where I'm at with the game.
No, that's great. I haven't, and I haven't played the game at all. I know Kamen is a gamer, and he has played through that game quite a few times. Patrick, when he's on, has also played through the game and is playing up to the spots that we are getting to in the show, which is really cool. If I was going to do that, I would not see my wife or kid for 7 straight days, and I think by the end of the first week, I'd still be playing as Sarah. So. So that's great. So as far as the TV show goes, were you excited coming in, or was this one that you kind of caught on to as it started? Oh, I got you. You're back.
So excited, you said?
Yeah. Tell us if you were excited or if this was something that you kind of jumped into over the course of the past couple weeks. Oh, and it looks like we've got her.
It looks like very excited for it.
There she is again. Cool. We got you. Twitch TV.
You got me?
Anything can happen. Yeah, we're here. Tell me again one more time.
Fine. Okay.
This might be a cursed question.
No. Yeah, I was excited. I was really curious, and I've been craving some HBO in my life, and since House of the Dragon. Just something like really kind of dark. And I was like, I'm not into zombies, but I knew I was gonna like the show. And I love Pedro Pascal. And honestly, when I was taking notes to come on today, a lot of the things that I said were less like specifics about the show and more like comparisons about how things are done better in this show than I felt like they were done in Game of Thrones in some comparable ways. Cool. So I'm enjoying kind of that aspect, but overall, yeah, I'm enjoying the series. Episode 3, last episode, the Henry episode was Henry and Sam. That was tough.
Bummer.
That was a tough one.
And we're in the second week in a row of no infected. I mean, well, we had some infected. I guess we had a big set piece, but we've gone through 6 episodes, and 2 of them at least have had maybe 1 infected over the course of the entire episode, which is really interesting, that this show is what it claimed to be, a show about people and the people that you're running into, whether they are allies or enemies. So without further ado, let's jump into our deep dive. This is episode 6, entitled Kin. This is directed by Jasmila Zbanic, who I knew none of her work. She's a Bosnian film director. I was waiting for a female eye in this show. It felt like it was time. So I think episode 6 is awesome for a time where we get that coming through. Again, this episode was written by Craig Mazin. Just a side note, whenever a recap shows us like everything important that just happened over the course of the last 6 episodes, I feel like I'm like, let's fucking go. Like, this is going to be it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. They're telling you better know everything, honey.
Yeah, you got to get into it. So, Kamen, once again, absolutely right about your theory that we were going to cut forward a few months. We find ourselves 3 months later, right after we see one last shot of Henry, which again just broke our heart, but also kind of got us into the idea of this has been right at the forefront of their minds for the past 3 months as they've been walking to Wyoming, right?
Sure.
So what a great use of just one final shot to give them that final send-off. Joel is sticking up the house of an elderly couple, but in a nice way. She made him soup. Does this happen in the game, Kamen?
No, this does not happen in the game. However, I do love this couple. Honestly, it was just because, like, look, let's be honest, the last couple episodes have been just brutally dark. So I do like that we go from like an awful opening of like, here's a reminder of how shitty this can get, to jumping to like this kind of lighthearted moment where we finally get to see like there's some humor here. Like, they can be funny when they want to be. But no, to your point, not in the game, but still also this is amazing. I love this scene so much.
This scene, and I'm going to say this might be the end of this podcast. When I first saw these two, this elderly couple, I incorrectly assumed that they were like Inuit, like Northern Canada couple, and I thought that Joel and Ellie had just gone the wrong way for like a really long time, like had just crossed into Canada. We're going north instead of west. And then I realized that it was two people like right off of a kind of a reservation, right? Yep. Which was really cool.
You know, I think I'm gonna. This is where we get the podcast cancels, is when I say this, but like they're well fed. These two people are well fed, and we're in the middle of like, look, they're eating rabbit, right? Like the husband shows up, he just killed 2 rabbits. Like, they're not like, you know. You don't have all the luxuries of getting fat when you're living in post-apocalypse, right? And like,
well, you know what it is? All of that underneath is muscle. They're just on a keto diet. It's all meat. They don't have any vegetables.
I mean, that's honestly probably fair.
Yeah, they're making their own carbs. They're making their bread out of their pea. They're just, it's just, they're bricks. If you try and run into them, you run into a wall. That's what
I'm sorry. If you could just rewind. What did you mean making bread out of the pea?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm just using pea as the water, right? I don't know.
So you're
Can
saying
you make bread with your own pea? I don't know. I just thought
I don't know.
I thought it was innovative. I didn't know. You don't make bread with your own pea, Emily?
No, not usually. Not typically.
Sometimes if I have like a Guinness and I pee, it smells like a loaf of bread. So there you go.
That's so true.
So Terry in the chat says they had deer too, and apparently potatoes go far, I guess. So
yeah.
No, that's facts.
That's also true. I suppose I didn't really think too much of it. So look at me being an awful human being. I'm over here just fat too. So like, I think I have a little wiggle room.
I know. Yeah, we don't have anything to go up against us, and I'm just way overweight at this point. So
yeah, same
yeah. Also, this scene ends with the 2 old people just laughing, like, and it's so creepy. Yeah. And I stopped for a second to wonder, why is it creepy when old people laugh? Like, do old people not laugh often, and that's why it's weird? Like, are old people just not very funny anymore and don't find things humorous? And then, like, what's happening here? They're like, I'm like, oh, creepy.
That's a good point. I worked in an old folks home, and like old folks are just kind of creepy. So like, I think there's just that factor that like old folks are kind of creepy as is. But I think the other part too is the fact that it's just, I think it's because these people have lived there forever, and them just kind of chuckling over the fact that it's like, oh, you want to go that way? Good. Oh, yeah. Good luck. Yeah. And you know, it's kind of, it's bad. Patrick says old people can't laugh, and that is science. And I'm not going to get the podcast canceled by saying anything else about old people. So
great.
Well, I'll say something about my mom, who is 80.
Oh, yes.
I think that what makes it creepy in this context is that like they're laughing about the circumstance, and like I think that it was kind of genuinely funny, whereas I think that some old people think that most things are really funny that aren't. Like, she was telling me this hysterical joke that she came up with where she was calling Cheerios donut seeds, and then she kept elaborating on the joke, and it went further and further to where like she was like taking pictures. Well, maybe you're the right audience, but in general, I think maybe it's because, you know, they know a lot at this stage, and it's kind of like, what are you laughing about that I'm not laughing about?
Right. They know that nothing's funny, so might as well try.
Yeah.
By the way, did you say your mom is 80?
Mm-hmm.
Seriously?
Yeah, seriously. Yeah, she had me when she was 50. Wow. I'm 30.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. That's incredible. I have nothing to say. Joel has a panic attack, and they...
I knew I was going to derail. I'm so sorry.
Move forward. Keep moving forward. Move forward. Joel has a panic attack, and they head towards the River of Death. Also, I'm assuming, just because of how much attention they paid to it, is duct tape a luxury in the game? I was just curious about that.
It is a crafting item, yes.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I thought I saw him, they really zeroed in on his boot as he was duct taping that boot back together. And I thought that feels like a game.
And also I think it's a nice little touch just to kind of to show like how far they've traveled on foot at this point.
Yeah.
To be and also just like common items like that we would just go to the store to get no longer exist in this universe. So like you have to take care of everything you have, or your shit just completely falls apart and you do what you have to do to survive. So, but you are correct. It was a nice little nod towards like inventory item management, because that is a crafting item you use to make shivs. You use that to upgrade items.
Cool.
So it is something that you do use quite a bit, and you scavenge for.
Awesome. That's cool. The Joel and Ellie have a talk about what life could look like after Cure. Joel wants a ranch with some sheep, and Ellie wants to go to the moon. This is such a great talk by the campfire, with him ending the conversation with "Dream of sheep ranches on the moon." Mm-hmm. I loved that. Such a good line.
A lot of sheep references in this
episode specifically. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's because we're all sheep, Emily, and we're essentially like snowflakes. And I don't know what I'm talking about. By the way, I know we talked a little bit about this last week, Kamen. Bella Ramsey in an interview did say that she, quote, "I'm very much just a person. Being gendered isn't something that I particularly like, but in terms of pronouns, I really couldn't care less." Mm-hmm. So very like gender fluid with her pronouns. But she did say in this in an interview I saw this week that she was able to really connect with Pedro Pascal, whose sister is a transgender actor and activist, Lux Pascal, awesome. And said that Pedro was really kind and supportive as they talked through a lot. There was a report that came out that said that Bella Ramsey wore tell me the name of it, because I'm blanking for a second.
It's not a corset, but I think it's called a chest compressor.
Chest compressor for the show, because they wanted her to be a little younger than she was portraying. And I just think that a scene like this around the campfire, you can feel when two actors are sitting together on night one, and you can feel when two actors have grown intensely comfortable with each other. Mm-hmm. And this was one of those moments for me. I just felt like you could feel the love and the trust between the two people more than even the two characters that they were portraying, which I really liked. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's also the moment that I asked the question, a little foreshadowing, does Joel cut his own hair? Because it's been 20 years and his hair looks dope in these scenes. Like it is like perfect, like hair by haircut. It looks great.
As someone who needs a haircut both upstairs and downstairs, as we addressed, I wish I could cut my own hair to look like that.
Well, it does bring us to our first made-up sponsor. Again, we're having made-up sponsors every week until we get a real one, and we are happy to have real sponsors. So anybody looking to peddle anything, let us know. But until then, our first sponsors, hairdressers and barbers. Cutting hair is really hard. If you're on Twitch right now, you can look at mine. I cut this myself about 2 weeks ago, and it looks terrible. So if you hairdressers and barbers actually know what they're doing most of the time, and you never feel more like a first class citizen than when you're getting a haircut and making somebody else do something for you. So get your haircut, hairdressers, barbers, right?
Yeah.
Right.
We also get a line here right at the end. That was our sponsor, by the way. We get a line right around here. Somebody says the quote, "undressing from the inside." Can you tell me where that was? I forget what they were talking about in this moment.
So at this point, Ellie is asking if she can hunt. Joel's still hesitant on giving her a gun. And honestly, in the game, we haven't gotten to the point yet where he teaches her how to do that. Cool. We're still kind of rolling off the heels of. So in the scene where Ellie gets her gun and she uses it, that is played out in the game a little bit differently. So at this point in the game, Ellie, like there's still a lot of contention around the fact that she has a weapon and that she's used it. So Joel doesn't want to like do it. So we haven't got to the point where she has been taught how to hunt yet. So she's asking the question like, when can I hunt? And he says, I think you know how to use a gun. I think you'll be fine shooting. I don't think you'll be fine like dressing an animal.
Right.
And so she makes the line about the joke about why wouldn't you call it undressing?
Undressing from the inside.
I have to say that was a pretty funny joke. I laughed pretty hard on that one. I was like, that's clever as shit because I don't think I would have thought of that myself, and that's why I'm not a TV writer for HBO.
Sure. And I have to say, and please excuse me, Emily, undressing from the inside is what I call coming.
Oh, God, this is why we can't not have Patrick on the show, because I feel like here's the thing. I love it when you do this, but I know he's out there somewhere and he's watching and he's crying. Hold on. Actually, here he is right now. Patrick in the chat. Jeremiah, you disgust me.
Well,
so
Patrick's sitting at home listening to us talk instead of talking with us. So suddenly they are surrounded by horsemen and women who are sniffed out. They get sniffed out by a sweet little puppy. Undressing myself from the inside now. They get sniffed out by a sweet little puppy, and then they ride into town waving a red flag, which seems like a red flag. I don't know about you.
So this is the first time that this, like, not the first time. Obviously, the scene, like I said before, the scene where the old folks in the home, that doesn't happen in the game. But this is the first big departure from the game that the
in this episode specifically.
In this episode, well, I mean, there's a couple times that things are like, oh, things are in different orders, or that they do something a little bit differently. This is the first time that really is like, oh, we're doing something drastically different now. Reason being, in the game, so they walk up on the dam, they see the dam, and this is when Ellie asks Joel, she says like, is this actually the river of death? Is this it? So in the game, that's actually where you meet Tommy. The dam has stopped working, and you have to go and restart the dam because the town that they live in, the power's out. So It's a huge set piece moment where you have to fight off a ton of infected. It's very scary, and a lot of people remember that particular scene. They never go to the town in the game at all. Like the town does not exist in the game. There's a lot here in this particular scene that is really cool. But a lot of that is spoilers, and I don't want to talk about that too much. But I will say that in the first game, they do not go to this town at all. Cool. And there's a lot of things that they do here and incorporate that are from the game. The way they incorporate those very clever and very smart. I wish I had Patrick here because he would probably say a lot of this better than me. But guess what? Here we are. I'm running the show now, baby.
Well, wish in one hand and pee in the other and see which one gets filled up faster.
Or makes bread faster.
That's good. God, we're really just on fire right now. I love that. I think that even having a departure like this, where I don't know, where you can go back into this town, have all of these different things that might happen over the course of hours of this game that you get to smush into one town, right? Which is great. Joel, they get into Jackson, Wyoming, and Joel finally meets up with Tommy, who is just working on the gallows over there in the corner, just trying to make sure everything's set up correctly.
God,
can we just say the Miller family, just a bunch of beautiful people,
a good looking crew.
They got good genetics over there.
They really do.
Yeah. That Tommy has the hair that when I look in the mirror, I think it looks like. I think that my hair looks like Tommy's hair when I look in the mirror. It doesn't. They meet up and things feel happy for about 10 seconds. Mm-hmm. At lunch, Ellie and Maria, one of the horsewomen, don't seem to see eye to eye. One of the horsewomen sounds weird, I guess, now that I say it out loud. When I wrote it down, she's not like a horse girl.
She's not like a centaur.
Okay, so here we go. This is where we get canceled again. Horse people, crazy.
And Joel finds out that he wasn't invited to the wedding of her and Tommy. Vibes are bad, and it seems like maybe Joel's reputation in this town is not a good one. everybody keeps walking by looking at him funny.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's funny you mentioned that. I completely glossed over the fact that Joel would be upset that he got married and he wasn't invited. Just right over my head.
Didn't get the transmission, didn't get anything.
I feel like he was busy. He was preoccupied.
He was throwing kids into fires and stuff. Yeah, that's true. They go around town and show Joel and Ellie around, honestly, like a really incredible town and a really incredible backdrop. Like this is one of those towns. I've been on a couple of tours theater wise, and I've gone to some like places deep, like buried in mountains, right? And like you get the valleys around you, you get these beautiful setups, anything close to this, like crowded in. It just felt like it was literally like one spot in between 5 mountains that they actually found with like a production designer. It's really cool.
I was going to ask you guys about that because I didn't know where was this filmed, or was this filmed at a studio, or if you guys knew, because again, one of the first things that I thought when I was watching, especially when they're on the way to the town, they haven't gotten there yet, that snow scene. I mean,
beautiful.
I don't pick up on graphics. I think we talked about this maybe, Jeremiah, when we did our boys episode. But I really don't pick up on like CGI very well. So like I'm not attentive to that kind of stuff, but that scene, it was stunning. Like that snow was stunning. And I was like, are they in real snow? Because I kind of didn't expect that.
I do think I mean, I think with it being HBO, I don't think any of it was like was CGI'd. I think they were really like because and I know in the post show scene that they talked about, if one of the vendors in that town said no to being filmed, that they couldn't do that town anymore. Unfortunately, everybody there was really, really kind.
Now, Patrick,
let's shout out something.
So Patrick, he's chiming in from the chat. He's doing due diligence when I'm not. So he loved how in the game Tommy talks about the idyllic Lincoln is to Joel during this section, and how they've carved out a little piece of paradise, and they actually showed us in the show instead. And that is true. Like I said before, like we actually don't see the town at all. You see it in the
talk about it.
Yeah, you see like I think when you start the dam back up and you get it going, you'll see like the lights from the town like come back on.
Cool.
But this is not something we see in the show. And then he follows up by saying he's pretty sure this was filmed in Canada, which probably true, honestly. But no, absolutely gorgeous. They do make a reference though at one point during the post-credit like talk about the episode where they mention like the stables were built in a parking lot. And so I don't know if that was like a metaphorical parking lot, like, oh, it was like we made it to look like this was an abandoned parking lot, or if they literally did that in an actual parking lot somewhere. I know from last episode, the cul-de-sac where we have the sniper shootout and the big finale or like the big moment where the bloater shows up. All of that takes place on a set. So there is a chance, and I can tell you right now, like just from further instance, that this is almost a shot for shot of what the town eventually does look like that we do get to see later. So I do like part of me wants to say like I think this was probably a set that they built like this town out of nothing specifically for this. At least some things were, at least interiors were completely rebuilt from ground. But yeah, it just looks, and also the whole town, man, let's be honest. Who wouldn't want to live there?
I know. Like, I want to live there now. Like I would
now.
They have movie nights, and I'm like, hey, look, if the apocalypse happens, hit me up. I've got 1,800 films that are physical.
Whatever the movie was that they were watching. Did you think that the movie they were watching was something that they filmed? Do you think that was like, yeah, please?
I know the movie.
Tell me, please.
Yeah. Sorry, because I was tweeting about it last night, and also watched Real Housewives of Potomac. Just give me 1 second.
Oh, you got to go through the
live tweeting through Real Housewives.
This is so embarrassing.
Oh my God. It's incredible podcasting.
Oh my God. Okay. Goodbye Girl. That was it. I was going to say.
Okay. So it's like
called Goodbye Girl. Yeah. It's a 70s movie. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Cool. I have a feeling
it's like a love story. I was wondering if it was like, had like survival, elements to it, because I didn't recognize it at first, but I think it's just like a love story, because I watched it for a film class long back in the day, back in my theater days.
Even though, like, even if you just look at it for face value, just the title of the film itself, like, there is face value there as well for like what happens later especially in this moment too, which I don't think we've gotten there yet. So I'm sorry for jumping too far.
I will say, if I was one of those kids, I'd be like, "Hey, do we have anything that came out in like 2001?" I know that this whole thing happened in 2002.
Jeremiah,
but like,
I know you say that, but there is Shrek out there right now, and he's waiting, and he is watching, and he's gonna peel you open like an onion. And
that's fair.
I'm just thinking, like, gosh, what came out? Like A Knight's Tale? Didn't that came out in like 99? Like, give us something with some action.
Final Destination came out in 2001. I'm just saying.
Thank you.
Patrick actually brings up a good point. So I love watching the movie nod in the game when they turn the power on. Tommy says to Joel, they'll be watching movies tonight, which is something I completely forgot. But since Patrick's playing through the game, he's better at this than me. And this episode is just going to be a stark reminder on how Patrick's better at everything than me.
Well, talking about this town, this is where I wrote in my notes. This is where I'd be done. Like, I don't care that she's immune. Wear long sleeves. We are not going to tell anybody. We're here now. Like, we're just going to live our days out here. Like, it would take a lot to get me out of that idyllic town. But not Joel. Joel and Tommy catch up over some whiskey, and they talk the only way that brothers know how, badly. Tommy reveals that Maria is pregnant, and that's all it seems to take to get Joel to want to leave this incredible city. So he goes outside. He has a panic attack again. He thinks he sees Sarah, which is really heartbreaking. And they got a great actress and a great hairdresser, hair and makeup department to make her hair like exactly that same silhouette from her in episode 1. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Well,
it was gorgeous.
I think it's worth pointing out that in the conversation with Tommy's asking him questions about like, who is Ellie? How is Tess doing? Things like that. And he's just like, oh, Tess is doing fine. She's great.
She's good.
Just passes on that. And then in regards to Ellie, he's like, oh yeah, she's some yuppity Firefly girl's daughter I have to transport.
Right.
I'm just doing this for money. And like that. And the whole thing is like, obviously he's leaving out a bunch of really important stuff, but in regards to the stuff he does leave out, I think the most important thing he doesn't tell Tommy in that moment is the reason we took this job on was to get a car battery to come save you. Like he leaves that out entirely. Like almost like, and I get it. Like, he shows up thinking he's got to go to save his brother. Something's happening to Tommy. And he gets there and Tommy's living his best life, man. He's married. He's got a kid on the way. Like he is excelling at life without Joel. And so not only is Joel like sitting there going over the panic attacks and all of these things, but he's also looking back at this being like, Tommy's better off without me. And like, that is like a crushing moment, I think, for Joel, for him just to be like, there's no reason we're here anymore.
And if we had stuck around together, whatever happened to break them apart, if we had stuck around together, Tess and I and you, like we'd all be in this town together, and maybe that would be the place where he could finally give Tess the love that she was giving him and all the things that she was asking for too, which is really sad. This is one of my favorite moments. Tommy starts to struggle with labels as they go around the city. Labels like communism. I love when she's like, no, this is a commune. We are communists. Literally, we are all sharing our stuff. That it's one of those moments where I want to look at like my parents and grandparents and be like, see, like it's a bad word because somebody told you it was a bad word and because somebody else made it bad. Like
that person was Ronald Reagan thinking,
Nancy,
hell, you son of a bitch.
Yeah. The Gipper. So Joel and Joel and Tommy catch up over some whiskey. They head back to the house so that they can Ellie and him can get set up and go see the rest of the town. Ellie has her first good shower in maybe forever and discovers what a menstrual cup is for the first time. Anybody?
Could I chime in?
Please.
I'd love that.
I would love for someone that's not me to chime in this moment.
Yeah. So here was this whole thing. And I don't want to skip too far ahead, but
Please.
The sociology major was just jumping out in me from the communism clarification to like the Maslow's hierarchy of needs here. And I just felt like I never used the cup. Okay. Just to be very clear, I don't want to talk too much about something I didn't use.
Sure.
But it just doesn't seem like, because like waste reduction is why like tampons and pads and stuff are not ideal.
Right.
But like in comparison, it's like more when the stakes are high and you're traveling out in the woods, do you really want to like pull blood in a cup out of you every time, or do you want to just toss it and keep on moving?
Okay.
I don't know.
I actually have a theory. And
okay, what's the theory?
So the theory I'm watching the episode with my wife, and first I looked at her and I said, I can't wait for the joke Jeremiah decides to tell in this moment on this episode.
Got nothing. I got nothing.
I'm glad you didn't. With that being said, it does actually kind of make sense in theory if you think about the fact that like one of the things that they're doing traveling cross countries, they're trying not to leave tracks, right? And so things like tampons, pads, or even if you're just using rags or whatever that you would use in that moment. I mean, I don't live in an apocalypse, and honestly, I don't have a vagina either, so I don't know. However, I could see that being like a way to be like, it would be easier for you to dispose of that in a very discreet manner than like leaving something like a used feminine product around. So if someone is following you, they can then be like, oh, here is like someone's been here recently. Is like these are fresh, or these have been, however long. That's my theory that I had, and that was just me talking to my wife, being like, I think this, and she kind of came to the same conclusion. Like, I think that makes sense. But I do understand that also seems very like, I don't know, obviously, like you said, I haven't used one either. I don't know, but like that does seem very inconvenient to have to be doing that in like the middle of like a clicker compound, and you're like, shit, let me go ahead and change this out real fast. But I guess I suppose it would be terrible if you're changing anything out ever during that. So like
in that moment,
yeah. So.
Yeah, I just didn't think it was practical, and I thought that Maria's priorities were strange, like the haircut, the trim.
So Patrick brings up a good point too, where he says
that's true. Yeah,
the cups are reusable. Tampons and pads are probably hard as shit to find, which is true. Like she does, like, but there was a scene at this. I think this was the opening of the Bill and Frank episode 3, in which she does find like a box of tampons, and she's like, "Fuck yeah!" Like finally, so like those are probably like hard to find.
That's true.
Right. Yeah, we see here in the chat too with Broadway Mom. Good to see you again, Broadway Mom. That they might not always have access to those supplies. Maybe they ran out of all of those supplies 5 years ago, and now every woman is supplied with a menstrual cup, and you can use it if you want, and you don't have to use it if you don't want, and that's your prerogative. The only joke that I could come up with, it was going to be in the intro. I was going to say that that she lives in Jackson, Wyoming, and is the door-to-door menstrual cup saleswoman, Emily Rose. But it didn't work as well as the other intros. So,
Jalissa, I know you're out there somewhere. Please come and get your husband. He needs to be put in timeout.
For sure.
This is where the haircut happens, and this is also where I feel like maybe Craig Mazin is like listening to my dreams and writing my perfect show, because like as I'm sitting and thinking about haircuts earlier in this episode, immediately she's like, let's cut that hair, just a trim. I know what I'm doing. You haven't had a haircut, you've got some split ends, like let's get you cut, which is so cool. To go back, I do cut my own hair now. Ever since COVID, I don't like going and getting like sitting in front of somebody and getting a haircut. It always feels really like I feel really. It's the most I ever feel like a white man, like that like icky white man feeling where you're like I am better than you. That's how I feel when I get a haircut. So now I just do it by myself at my house.
You have a lot of, because you said something like that earlier, you have a lot of like emotional ties to hierarchy in the supercuts.
That's exactly right. It's the sports cuts. That's the problem. It's the massage at the end.
Okay, hold on.
What are we doing?
This way. So I went down with the herniated disc a few months ago. I haven't been able to go sit in a chair long enough to get my hair cut. So my wife has been cutting my hair in the kitchen. Is this inappropriate too, Jeremiah?
No. Julissa actually was the one who started cutting my hair during COVID, and then I just took over after a while.
Fair
yeah, I think that's great. Emily?
I haven't had a haircut since 2018 because I actually truly do have severe emotional issues with my hair being cut. So I was kind of projecting a second ago, and I apologize. But
okay, great. Wait, listen, it's nice to have some things in common.
Oh God, I'm sorry. And honestly, there was a couple of moments during this episode where I was like, but it's truly just me projecting. Like, I was really empathizing with Joel when he found out that his brother was having a baby, and he like lashed out and ran away. And I was like, yeah, you know what? That's fucked up that you're having a baby. And really, it's just because my best friend is having a baby, and we won't be able to go to trophy room on the weekends for like months. And so I'm like, you know, just projecting. And then the haircut, because I just don't want to get my haircut. So
it's fair.
Yeah. I'm going through a whole emotional show.
People who have kids are selfish. Just ask Jeremiah.
I haven't had a drink outside of my own house in 2 years.
That's not true. We got drunk the other day. Not the other day. We got drunk back at the start of fantasy football. I was there for that.
Oh, okay.
Fantasy football draft. Okay, you're right. September. Thanks, Kamen. Maria and Ellie do what is done best while you're getting your haircut. They gossip about Joel. She says, be careful who you put your faith in. The only people who can hurt us are the ones that we trust. My pastor in high school used to say, your friends will determine the direction and quality of your life. And for about a decade, I challenged that notion, and that pastor was correct. Bad friends are not good. Maria was right too. We've been following Joel, which makes us feel like he's the hero, but he really is not in this story. There are a lot of people who are doing things in a much more evolved and conscious way. We just happen to be dropped in on Joel. And so it's doing that thing that happened with Walter White, and it happened with Saul Goodman, and it happens with all of these heroes that are not actually heroes, which is that we just continue to root for them as they either continue to fail, continue to struggle. But those are the people who we relate to the most, right? We don't want to follow the full hero.
And this is also where Ellie finds out that Joel had a daughter, because this is something that's been kept from her for their entire time together. You know, he's always been very closed off about things in his life and all these things. And in the game, she overhears Joel and Tommy, which we do get eventually. But this is like where this kind of dump. So this is accurate for when it would be taking place in the game, is where she finds, like, this is where in the game she finds out about Sarah, that, you know,
cool,
which is, I think, really pivotal to an upcoming conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Ellie goes to the movies. It does not seem like a hit. They're all, it's the most anybody looked like a zombie this whole episode. What'd you say?
I said it was back in the day, but yeah, not with the group.
And Tommy gets Joel some new boots. This is where Pedro Pascal has his Emmy moment, and convinces Tommy to escort Ellie to the University of Colorado, about a week's ride away. This conversation, I don't really even have a lot to say about it. It is gorgeous. If you're sticking with us 43 minutes into this deep dive, you saw it, so you probably agree with us, I would assume. I loved that this man who can't be vulnerable with anybody but his brother gets a chance to be, you know, and it seems like it's literally years of weight that he's letting off of his shoulders as he says that Tess is not with us anymore, that Ellie is immune. I loved she's immune. Like, I saw her get bit. That was weeks ago. I promise you. Patrick says, I'm failing in my sleep. That one was it, and it was true, because you see him waking up or not sleeping because he knows that if he does, he might fail, you know? And he did earlier in the episode where they have the campfire scene. They fall asleep. He wakes up and his gun has been taken from him by his partner, right? He failed to keep her safe. She just happened to succeed at it, you know?
Well, she succeeded a couple of times at this point. Like,
absolutely,
she's the one. And,
oh yeah.
You know, I think there's the callback to the Sam and Henry portion where, you know, he says like, I watched a brother take the life of their own, like their brother, two brothers killing themselves, because I couldn't pull the trigger to stop that from happening. And it's, you know, and that's the thing I think we've been kind of hammering home the last several episodes is like, this is Joel. Like he is. I think it was when they first got to Kansas City, Patrick pointed out a really poignant statement, was like, Joel is constantly failing.
Yeah.
And we didn't know it then. We now know that like this actually is true. This is like a big moment of him like recognizing like, I am getting older. I'm deaf in one ear. I'm not as mobile as I used to be. And I'm attached to this person and I'm terrified of what that means. And it's a very strong moment. This scene is, it's rough to watch when you see someone that's just like that shattered going through this. And at the same time, you know, Ellie is overhearing, she's listening in on this conversation, you know, while this is going on, and hears all these things, you know,
right.
And she hears obviously that Joel is going to drop her off with Tommy, and that's it. Like that's the end of their story together.
I think for me, when I was watching it, I realized how much I was viewing the show from Ellie's lens in this moment, because when he was talking, I was like, you know, I didn't see him as vulnerable or weak, or, you know, until Ellie had said something about your ear. I was like, oh yeah, that's true. But when he's sitting here and he's talking about not just his physical, but his emotional vulnerability, I was like, wow, honestly, until you said that, I thought you were pretty badass. But I mean, you're right. You're kind of, you fucked up a couple of times, you know? And I think that that's just it's so the way that the show, like you said, Jeremiah, this is a show about people, and the way that you become invested in and see this through the lens of people and relationships is really, that scene, it got me. It's a Emmy moment.
Well, it's interesting too. We do this deep dive, and then I edit it and upload it, and I don't listen to it again because we've talked through it. So I'll go listen to other deep dives and see what other people have to say. And one of the I listened to the House of R on the Ringerverse, and and I know that Joanna made a really interesting point on that episode last week of you know, Joel says to Henry in the episode last week, I've heard Kansas City Fedra was crazy, right? And he says this, and I don't think about it in that moment, but a week later you go, well, if you fucking knew that KC Fedra was crazy, don't go through Kansas City. Like, do anything you can to go around Kansas City. You failed yourself, and you failed this girl by going through not only through a town where you knew that Fedra was intense, but once you got there and it looked bad, you didn't turn around and go back. You know what I mean? You continued to try and like force your way through these mistakes. I know that there are a lot of characters who, from all the way from, you know, Weeds back in the day, Sopranos, all, you know, a lot of prestige dramas where the lead is almost intentionally trying to do things badly. Like, especially in Weeds, she just likes getting in trouble. She likes the feeling of being in danger, of feeling like she might die at that point. This doesn't feel like that with Joel. It just feels like it's a man with not great decision-making skills in the moment, you know? And that's who I am. I'm not like, if you give me a choice between two restaurants, it will break me on a Thursday afternoon, much less trying to get some kid who might be the cure for the entire world across a country that you've never been all the way through, fighting people you've never fought, and trying to make it. It's just, it's really wild.
Yeah.
Joel and Ellie fight. They have a fight like a father and a daughter. And Ellie says that she would just be more scared if she had to go without the one person who has always been there for her. This is her Emmy moment for me too. The look that she gives him after she says this line, that is so intense and so full of anger, but also her eye. You see how much fear is in her eyes. That he is serious about what's about to happen.
So
loves this.
So in the game at this moment, Ellie overhears Joel and Tommy having the conversation about how she's going to be taking, like, essentially Tommy's going to be taking her and is going to leave. And so what ends up happening is she runs away. She takes one of the horses and she takes off through the woods, and she finds like a little inlet town with a few houses, maybe like just a street. And she posts up in one of the houses. So the thing is like, they're not, like I said before, they're not in the town. Like the town is not in the game. And so when he goes in and finds her in that room is a shot for shot of the house in the game. Cool. The room now in this entire scene is almost verbatim for what happens in the game. And they even mention it in the post show, like spoiler talk, but they talk about the fact that like, this was the hardest thing for two actors to do, is to try to recreate one of the most emotional parts in a game and like recreate it live. And like, how do you do that? How do you do it, sir? Justice? And then they were like, essentially like, you just have to do it just like it is.
Right.
And like, I can only imagine as an actor where you're being tasked with like taking something that's already immaculate and then turning it into what we see on screen, which is also immaculate. Like that interaction between the two of them, like you said, like this is very much the moment where Ellie or Bella Ramsey wins their their Emmy. Like that's when that happens. And like it's, and when she comes, there's the moment where Ellie says, I'm not Sarah. I'm not your daughter. I'm not
says,
like
don't
her.
say another word.
Yeah, and he's like, don't say. Oh man, that line every time gets me. And then like him being like, she's like, I'm not your fucking daughter. He's like, and I'm not your fucking father. And you're just like, and you can tell in that moment too, like they have now become. This is the moment they become father-daughter. Like this solidifies that relationship between the two.
Because as much fun as you can have and as intense as things can get around you, that father-daughter dynamic doesn't kick in until you have that fight with each other, right? Yeah. I loved this. I'm not an actor anymore. I'm retired. And I'll be coming out with my book of memoirs soon. But when I was in college, I thought I wanted to be an actor, and I told myself the only things that I want to do are write like really intense, dramatic or comedic work that's completely original. And what I didn't realize is that 90% of acting is Josh from Blue's Clues, right? Is like standing in a green room and pointing at things that don't exist and talking to those fake animals, and or coming in and doing things like this. And a lot of times we have these moments where I remember doing theater and having people be like, I never want you to give me a line reading. I don't want you to tell me how I'm supposed to say this line. I'm an actor. You hired me to say this line, so I'm going to say it how I want to. I used to love a line reading. If you knew exactly how you wanted it to be said, tell me. So I felt when I saw this, you're right, Kamen, in our post-show spoiler talk at the end of the episode, when they said that they just had to watch the scene and go do it and do it with the emotions that they carry within them, that is different than the emotions that the actors playing Joel and Ellie in the video game had. But saying those same lines and having that same intensity, great. Give me a line reading. Tell me what to say and how to say it. That's awesome. I loved this scene.
Yeah.
So Patrick brings up a question for the two of you, and I think it's important. I would save this to the end of the show, but I'm curious about you guys because we'll do it right now. But for Patrick's asked, for Emily and Jeremiah, having not played the game, did the timeline of this land for you guys, like for y'all? Patrick felt like it was kind of rushed in the show, but only because he had the game to compare to, where they take a little bit more time.
Go ahead, Emily.
Well, so like I said, I watched several, like I watched like a deep dive, like I watched a playthrough, I watched like an entire timeline, I've watched Let's Plays. And I do have a couple of questions about things that aren't exactly adding up, but I think that would be a spoiler. Particularly,
why don't you ask them and we'll see.
Okay. Is it the town? They do end up in that town, though, right?
Spoiler.
Okay.
Great.
Wait, is that a spoiler if I say spoiler?
No. I think that's plenty. And that makes sense, right? Over the course of a game, you're going to have 30 to 40 hours. There's going to be a town that you see that is an idyllic, heaven sent town, and the idea is that somebody hopefully makes it back there, right? Like that doesn't feel like a spoiler to me to say that this would be the place that anybody in their right mind would want to try and get back to.
Right.
That maybe that's what we can say here.
Yeah, and I think it's important also to point out that like this works for the TV show, whereas like the dam sequence in the game works better for the game. Like the way the game has been taking you through and what you've been doing up to that point, it's better for you not to go to the town. You need this moment right now. Like you need this moment in the game to happen the way it plays out in the game. Whereas I do think in the TV show to set up all of these other relationships and all of these other things that are taking place, I do feel like going to the town in the show, like that works because we are getting, it just structurally feels better because the show has gone that direction so far. But I think like if the show were to be more closely tied to the game in certain aspects, like I do think the dam probably would have been the place for them to have this moment. Whereas I think, and so I just think like it's all the little things that have added up that they've changed in the game makes this work better now. Whereas like it's just they're almost at this point, I think when you compare these two instances together, it's like apples and oranges.
Yeah.
Like which one works better for the way that story is being told. Whereas like, I do feel like in the show, it works better that it's told like this. But I do agree with Patrick that it is a little bit rushed to me. And it very well could just be the fact that like I've played the game several times. So it's like, it does feel like it's like, oh man, you do have a little bit more build up, a little bit more suspense, a little bit more, because it is so like, I mean, we're on a timeline, we're on a timeline here.
I'd be willing to say that, or to bet it, like, not going into like theory corner, just future. I'd be willing to bet that for you and Patrick, that probably starts to feel more and more common as game players because we're ramping our way up towards an ending. So they are going to be condensing a lot of the big, hours long campaigns towards the end into half of an episode or into a 15-minute set piece or something like that. For me, it didn't feel rushed to me. I completely agree. I think that if you got to the town in the game, I would just turn the game off. I'd be like, we won, we made it, and that's awesome. Let's go back to the beginning and keep going. So I thought it was a really nicely, to be completely honest with you, I thought this episode specifically was really nicely paced.
Yeah,
I thought there wasn't a moment where I felt like it was dragging, and there wasn't a moment where I felt like I had to look up from my phone where I'm taking notes, right? Like, I felt like there was a moment where I could pause it, take a note, keep going. I wasn't too far away. This is when we get, by the way, in the show to Joel having this specific memory, and I'm just going to tangent here. I'm going to have a dad tangent. Joel has this specific memory after he and Ellie leave each other about decorating a Christmas tree, and you just see his hands and Sarah's hands, and I paused the episode and I cried at this moment because this was that parent that I was looking for, right? Because we've seen Joel mourning his loss of Sarah. We saw it as she died. We saw a little bit of his emotional state immediately after. And then we see 20 years later that he has buried all of it, right? And we see little glimpses of him smiling with Ellie or whatever, but you don't see in his mind exactly the things that he still sees. And this just broke me to such a deep level. Yasmila Zubanik has one kid, just by the way. The director of this episode has a child. Like every day that I have a day with Penelope and it's just me and her, and we have hours at a time where we hang out, and she will say, "Dad, dad, 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 dad," 150,000 times, to the point that it is like stuck in your brain and driving you crazy. And then she will like reach up to me, or she will come out and high five, or she will spin around in a circle and fall on purpose and giggle, and it becomes this memory that I want so badly to be a core memory. But I'm 34 years old, so my core memories are set, right? So all I can do is like hope that it's a core memory for her, and try as hard as I can to like smush that into my memory bank, hopefully kicking some extemporaneous like actor that I know their name and I don't need to. But there are 12 moments a day where that happens, where if I had a day without her, or if I had to spend any amount of time without her, I would close my eyes and I would see these little moments of her feet, or a hand, or her spinning and her hair spinning in a circle, or whatever it is. I thought that this was such an effective way to show that this hurt never goes away. Like this loss of a child, you can push it down as far as you can. You can be fine with Tess being gone. Like he is emotionally damaged by that, but he is not wounded at the core by that. Like it's still Sarah, and that it just killed me. Like that dichotomy of wanting to keep yourself and your family like in a tiny little bubble and keep them safe, and then knowing that you have to get out into the world and adventure for this life to be worth it at all, is such a scary thing. So I just thought that they set it up so well in this episode to just make us remember the reason he's alive and the reason he's still moving forward, you know?
Yeah.
Well, way to bring
anyway
this whole episode down. Thanks, bud.
Well, that said, the next morning, Joel throws a little surprise party to let her know that it's going to be him taking her. Even though I thought it was going to be him and Tommy. I thought it was going to be the three of them going for a second.
I did
but
too.
He was just stealing a horse, ready to go. So this was great. The father-daughter shit in this is killing me. They make it to the University of Colorado in 5 days. That poor horse. They say it's a 7-day trip. They're just running that horse. They make it, and they start looking around. It's too quiet. They start fucking going towards the bad sounds. My least favorite trope in any horror ever. Like, don't go the opposite way. It winds up being monkeys. They look around, and it seems like everyone there left for Salt Lake City. I'm assuming because that's where the Mormons are, and polygamy is legal, and you can marry as many people as you want. And that's like a cool thing to have happen in a pandemic. Joel and Ellie see some just 4 random gangbangers. Like, who are these people just walking around the campus of University of Colorado?
I really was very confused by
that. Was the most confusing part of this was who these people are.
Now,
this felt rushed to me.
Yeah, that felt rushed. I did love any moment that we can take to remember that college is a scam. I really appreciate that. And so Ellie asking questions like, the fuck? They go to classes to do what? So that was really, I appreciated that. But the rest of it, I was really confused. The monkeys were infected, right?
No.
They were infected. They were not.
No.
Okay, so apparently I was totally, this threw me a bit.
So those monkeys are gluten-free. So they didn't eat the flour. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know. Go ahead, Kay.
Okay,
please.
So there's a couple things I want to point out. First is when they're walking through, he tells her, he's like, because earlier in the episode they mentioned, she asked him like, what is your dream job? Like, what would you do once this is all done? And he makes the comment to her. He's like, I changed my mind. I actually want to be a singer. That's what I wanted to do. That's actually from the game. That's something that is from the game. It does come back up later. He teaches her how to play he can play the guitar. He teaches her how to play the guitar. I think that was a really, there was a ton of Easter eggs in this episode that set up things in season 2 that I'm very excited. Or presumably season 2, who knows what they're going to do with the next season or how long the show is actually going to last. So there's that. I think the other thing is the monkeys are also from the game. They are running around the campus. And second, in the campus, it is actually filled with infected. And you find out that essentially someone got something went wrong in the campus. So the reason they all had to flee the campus was because they were infected. Okay. So when you get there, there's not only just infected, but you encounter, I think it's the second bloater of the game is actually in the campus location.
Cool.
And so, but I do kind of like the idea that they set up with the first instance of the bloater is like, do not trifle with these things. They are almost unkillable. Like they are like these unstoppable creatures. So I do think that it might lessen the blow of like how dangerous that is if you include more of them. Right now, I think another instance later in the season would be really cool to see, like that thing, like another show up and then realize like shit's about to go down. There's another one here, and I would love to see them actually take one out. That'd be really cool,
right? But, an actual face to face, because they saw it. Joel up in his perch, and Ellie from behind the car, but neither of them had like an interaction with the bloater. Yeah, it would be really cool to see them specifically.
Have
something to
do
with them.
Yeah. With all that being said, the way this whole sequence does end is actually by them being attacked by a group of raiders. Patrick makes a good point where he says, for someone who didn't play the games, I think they just want you to think they're generic bandit raiders that have been mentioned in past episodes, like in episode 3 when they stormed Bill and Frank's place, which to his point, yes, I do agree to that. I think the other thing too is you have like, going back to the menstrual cup idea is like, if you know they're survivors and you're these types of people, you will track until you can get them, or they're people who are scavenging and see that there's a horse tied up. Now, does it feel a little bit rushed? Yes. This segment in the game is much, much longer, and you do get a little bit more buildup and a little bit more tension. And then, but it is, I mean, honestly, this is kind of how it works in the game is you're about to leave. Like you realize, like you've seen the map, you realize, or I don't even think it's a map. You see a note where it's like, we're heading to the home base in Utah and Salt Lake. Like we're heading there, pack up your shit. That's where we're going. And then they go to leave the building and you hear like people outside and you're like, oh shit, like we're surrounded. And so it's, and Patrick also says that it even though it felt like they only spent 5 minutes at the university, we got the important beats, which is true. We did. Like we do, like they kind of really nail all the things that we get. But yeah, it does when you see it play out live like that, because when you're playing the game, like it's so much more tense and suspense driven. And like this sequence has a lot of action in it. When you get the Raiders coming in as well, you're like, good God, like I don't have the chance to breathe. Like we need to get the fuck out of here. And then all hell breaks loose.
Well, I think to that point, Emily, I don't, you can tell me if you agree with me. This was probably the most that it felt like a video game that just 4 random raiders were walking through the campus,
No, right? Because
every other time that we've seen another group of people alive, we've known sort of where they came from or why they were there or something to that effect. And this literally felt like one of those moments where these people kind of spawned around the corner and were suddenly walking up. Right. And you're like, well, you're not college students here. I know that you're not, you might have tracked us for days, but Joel's better than that. Joel actually understands. Well, I know we've talked about him making a lot of mistakes, but that is the one thing that he has figured out, right? Is how to make sure that people aren't near him or coming near him, right? So if they had been tracking him for any longer than that afternoon, or if they were, maybe they just were holed up on campus looking around to see if people were coming through so that they could steal supplies. But I just didn't get any sense of who they were. And they came at the last 5 minutes of the episode, which made me go, well, okay, it feels like we're sort of rushing our way through to get to the next beat. So we get to, let's see, they try to sneak out from the gangbangers before one of them comes up on Joel. Joel snaps the neck of that guy, and they seem to get away from the other 3, but not before half of a baseball bat winds up in Joel's belly. He falls off the horse after they've escaped, and he looks super dead. I'm hoping he's not. I've seen the picture of episode 9 with him in it, so I who knows? But that's it. It ends with Joel Ellie standing over Joel, begging him to wake up. We get just a glimpse of next week's episode, which seems like a flashback episode, which is at this point in a season my least favorite thing to happen.
Shut the fuck up, Jeremiah.
It is, man.
Sure?
Shut the fuck up. Trust me, shut the fuck up. In the game, Joel doesn't get a baseball bat in the stomach. He actually gets tackled and falls off a balcony and lands on a piece of rebarb.
Ooh.
And pulls himself off. And in the game, he's actually like you're dying essentially, like fending them off to make it to the horse, and then dies. Die. The rest of it is his ghost. It's the ghost of Joel. That's the spoiler alert. But yes, next episode is going to be a flashback.
I'm sorry. Wait.
Oh, I'm not giving any spoilers away for what happens next. That was
great. Okay, you're not actually telling us.
But no, to your point,
it felt so real, dude. You really
are you an actor?
Yeah.
No, but I've been lying to myself every day that I'm special.
No, you're acting with yourself every day.
Wait, but Jeremiah, are you sure it's a flashback? Or is it a flashback episode? Okay.
Yes, I wasn't thoroughly modern Millie in high school. That was
That's one of my favorites.
I was in the ensemble. I did have one line where I yelled raspberries to the crowd, and I always got a laugh.
Sweet.
If Patrick was here, he can confirm that statement to be true and not.
We won't talk about what role Patrick played.
We will not talk about that. But yes, the next episode, and this isn't really a spoiler, because there's no spoilers in it. But the next episode is the Left Behind DLC. So it is a DLC, and so when you play the game, this does not take place while in the game. It takes place 10 years into the pandemic. Maybe a little bit sooner than that, but essentially it takes place several years before Joel meets, or a few years at least before Joel and Ellie meet, and it follows, like, essentially it's kind of like the story of Ellie. So that will be next.
How Ellie got to where she is now. Exactly. And listen, I love that, and I am looking forward to seeing what happens. Mm-hmm. It's just when we get to a point in a show where something has happened and we don't know if someone is alive or dead, and we don't know how they're going to get out of that situation, and the creators say, we'll tell you in 2 weeks, but first we're going to give you a little bit of explanation. Like,
I love it.
I would honestly, I'm in a minority here, I know that, but if you did the whole show top to bottom and then had a flashback episode, I would watch it. Right. So I know that most people wouldn't, but
so Patrick
this is where we wish season 1 ended.
Yeah. Patrick says this is where he wish season 1 ended, which honestly 100% on board with that statement. Like, this would be a great cliffhanger to end on.
Sure.
But I do like that. I mean, we know that they're going to complete the plot of the first game. And so it wouldn't make sense to end here, but like so I do think this is like a nice trade-off to that. We do get a flashback episode that bridges the gap to find out what does happen to Joel. Because we don't, like, if you're, and this is, I looked at my wife and we're talking about it, and she was like, man, there's going to be a lot of people really fucking pissed off that they're probably not going to see what happens next episode at all. And I'm like, this is fucking amazing. I love that they're doing this to people, because like in the game, when this happens, like, this is a soul crushing moment. Like, this is one of the big, like, a huge heartstring pull. Like, this whole show has just been filled with this, right?
Yeah.
Whether
you're going to say, Emily?
Scam or Tess or all that, right?
Well, no, I was just going to ask. So you guys said that there's 3 more episodes after this, right?
7, 8, 9.
Yep. 7, 8, 9.
Because this gave like penultimate vibes to me.
Yeah.
Like, it was very penultimate-y. But so I was going to make a point that doesn't work. So
don't worry. We've got about 3 more gut punch moments that are be coming up. Okay. So and this is the thing, we were talking about it, I think, on episode 2 when Tess dies. And we're like, it doesn't get any easier from here. Like, this is every episode there's going to be a gut punch moment that's just going to shake you to your core.
Yeah.
And this came in is why I am excited about Succession coming soon, because ultimately, at the end of the day, all these rich assholes, nothing bad happens. Nobody dies. Nobody has to break a neck. Nobody has to stab each other with a baseball bat. They're all just rich idiots. And then at the end of it, it's kind of back to the same place it was at the beginning of it.
Don't you love it? Don't you just love that? Don't you? Isn't that just the best thing ever?
It's like a snowball. It's like a snowballer situation with that show. And
remind me again what snowballing is.
Excuse me, Emily, again. Snowballing is when is the act of someone taking your finish and then putting it back into your mouth, thus finishing the cycle, which happens in season 1 of Succession with Tom.
Right.
You swallowed your own load. I cannot wait for Succession to come out. This show, this is going to be a great season.
I can't wait to
any final thoughts
from you guys for a while?
Any final thoughts on this episode from either of you before we get out of here?
I have one quick one, just because I don't know when I'll have an opportunity to bring it up. But when I was thinking about Game of Thrones and kind of there's like similarities between, to me, Arya and Ellie.
Okay.
But the way that they're executing Ellie and maturing her in ways that are realistic to her circumstance, but also keeping like the wonderment of children, kind of like a little bit of immaturity, but keeping her aware of her circumstance and building on survival skills that she's already had and growing them. Whereas with Arya, in my opinion, which I know this is controversial, she also, she saw some shit. Okay, she went through some shit, but her maturity didn't change in a way that I thought would be, in my opinion, reasonable to what
to the trauma that she
went through. You know, when you go through trauma like that as a kid, it ages you, mentally in some ways. And so because I just thought, I was like, man, what are the takes going to be? Are people going to get tired of Ellie's like quippiness and her corniness and how talkative she is? Like, are people going to start? Because I'm like, I am loving it because I feel like it's well done. And so far there was a couple moments in this episode where I was like, ooh, did she have to comment there? But she does have to comment there because it's true to her character and it makes sense, but she's still making like survival informed decisions when she has to. And whereas Arya was just in the streets, just doing whatever the hell she felt like doing. And that wouldn't make a whole lot of sense in my opinion. I wasn't there.
I would venture to say that has to do with more with writing than anything. Like,
yeah, for sure. For me, sure. It's not a knock on anybody.
Well, no, I think just even this episode, what you said, like, about her, like having to say something, the things that she says are quippy, but so much darker, or so much more darkly delivered than the things that she said earlier in the season. And when you give an actor something like that to say at dinner, we want you to say this line, but we want you to say it with some meat underneath it, right? And that difference between her pun book at the beginning, even when she says the pun, even when they walk up on the dam, she says, "Damn," and he says, "You're no Will Livingston," or whatever, and she's like, "Well, who is?" The way that she says it has such a grown-up voice to it. She's like, "Well, who is?" Like that sarcasm that wasn't there at the beginning. That she didn't have time for sarcasm because she was too busy with the puns earlier. And I just love that. Like, I think Maisie Williams, is that her name? Who played Arya? I think she did an awesome job with some really interesting stuff. About 2 seasons of faceless man shit that is just impossible to get through. I know, but you see that, she has the fight with with Gwendolyn Christie's character, where she does the drop the knife to her other hand to get the drop, and then she uses that on the Night King, right? Every actor is looking for those moments of like, how can I take what happened earlier and put the gravitas in? And that's probably why a lot of the actors, when you saw them being interviewed about season 8 of Game of Thrones, were like, it's great, because they felt like the writing had been given up on,
Do you think though that it's harder to tell a more human story in a world like Game of Thrones, where so much of it is fantasy, whereas like The Last of Us is so much more grounded because it takes place in what would be considered like a real world if we were to be overrun by cordyceps in 2003?
I don't know. I think that Game of Thrones was driven. I mean, obviously all the fantasy elements were there, but it was also very much driven by people, and like vengefulness is a very human thing, and that was plagued several of the girlies,
Well, that was what it was. That's what the show is billed as, right? It's like a fantasy show that is going to take us into the hearts and minds of the people there. And for a couple of seasons, I felt like, people always say that Game of Thrones, the best stuff that they did were people talking in magnificent rooms, right? Like those are the best scenes, are the Tyrion, I drink and I know things scenes, even if his accent is terrible. But I thought you're right. I mean, once they got past the books, and kind of lost what they were going to do, or had an idea of what they were going to do and tried to barrel towards that, it suddenly became so much more fantasy driven, and so much, even down to the, spoilers for Game of Thrones, I guess. But down to some of the final episodes where you just see Daenerys kind of take a turn so quickly into being a villain. You're like, where did that come from? Like, I guess I can make a case for it if you told me I had to, but that's not what I want to do. Like, I'd rather you give it to me. That's why I'm paying $15.99.
I know you want us to give it to you, buddy.
That's right. And I don't know that there's a better place to end than there. Guys, thank you, Kamen. Oh, you're always here. I love having you. Emily, such a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. If you like what you are listening to, please join us on Monday nights at 8 p.m. You can follow us on Twitch at Spotlight Game. Is it Spotlight Games? That's right, on Twitch, or Spotlight Games Pod on Twitter and Instagram. That is the gaming podcast that Kamen and Patrick put up for you guys. We are Spotlight TV. And then you can follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Spotlight TV Pod. Where can they follow you, Kamen?
They can follow me on Twitter at Kid Kamen, or if you're interested in trash cinema and all of the world surrounding all of your favorite sleazy, cheesy, and everything in between these, you can follow that at Save Trash Cinema on all socials. Quick shout out, if you're listening to this, guess what? We have an episode live. And that episode is an interview with director Tony Wash, who is part of Bloody Disgusting. He was the director behind films such as The Rake, Skeletons in the Closet, and is the person who heads up, he also did High on the Hog, but he also heads up Screambox TV's Bloody Bites. And so if you're into horror short films, definitely go check out Screambox TV's Bloody Bites. He's the one who essentially procures all of those films and curates what goes into that program. It's an incredible interview, and so it will be live Tuesday.
I loved The Rake. That's that movie. It's just a comedy, just pratfalls, where somebody just keeps stepping on a rake over and over again.
It's Chris Pratt, specifically just hitting himself in the face with a rake for 2.5 hours.
Hilarious. And Emily, where can we find you?
Yeah, so you can find me. You can follow me on Instagram at Emily Agogo. That's at Emily Agogo. But if you want to follow my podcast, Who the Fuck Knows with Emily Rose, I am at Who TF Knows Emily Rose on Instagram, and I will be having a live episode coming out this week. I'm a little behind. I apologize. I am covering episodes 1 and 2 of Vanderpump Rules season 10. I talk about guilty pleasure television and getting rid of feeling guilty about shit that you love. So I don't feel guilty about loving Vanderpump Rules 10 years in. And I may be doing a mini episode on why I hate that 90s show and the whole concept without ever having watched it. So we'll see if I have the energy for that. But
if you when you do that, have me on because I have also not watched it, and I just hate everything about it. It represents everything bad about entertainment today. It is the opposite of The Last of Us, which will come out next week with episode 7. We look forward to having you guys here on Monday. This pod will drop late Monday night. Give it a follow, give it a listen, and don't forget to press triangle for boost. Bye. Bye-bye.